Belknap.
I'm Jimmy Lewis.
And I'm Trevor Hunter. This is Dirt Bike Test, and you're listening to the Dirt Bike Test podcast. Today we are talking about the 2020.5 KTM 450SX Factory Edition.
Yeah, so this is KTM's way of, doing a couple things, showing us what's going to come in 2021. They are also meeting some homologation rules, so Cooper Webb can race this bike in the Supercross series and also, of course, the Outdoor Nationals, or a version of this bike. And then they get to put some extra bling and parts on the bike so that maybe the consumer that's whether a fan or just wants to get a jump start on the next year, wants to have a couple trick parts on your bike, this is a way of doing it. So the bike, really, the changes are very similar to the 2020. It basically is upgrades. It has fancier wheels that have some different hubs with the different spoking pattern in the front. There's revised suspension settings, and it's kind of tied into a lot of internal changes they did in the air fork. There's changes to a lot of the parts in there. In fact, you would almost call it a whole new fork of the same design. They did some valving changes to the shock. They say a lot of it's in relation to having some new slipperier seals and bearings, and that goes along with a linkage and swing arm that's supposedly changed or unique to this bike. With the KTM, you get an Acro exhaust system, and of course the number 1 plates come on it standard, as well as the Red Bull factory team-like graphics kit. So, and it has a bumpy seat on it, of course.
Yes.
So those are the biggest changes from last year's bike. It's really not a whole lot of changes, but in our opinion, it was enough to make a difference. And we'll kind of get right into it and start talking about the power. So what did you think about the power?
I really liked the power on it. It felt really, coming from a YZ250, it felt like it wasn't just too much to where I couldn't handle it. It felt very just soft, and it just eased into the power, but it still had a lot of power there for you to utilize.
Kind of the same thing. It's very typical KTM power as of late. It's very linear, and it's very smooth, and it wasn't too abrupt or it wasn't hard to ride. There's definitely a lot of power, but it's manageable, which is something where I've grown as a rider a little bit, but I also think they've worked on making the power more rideable.
Yeah, and one of the noticeable things with this bike is and this is something that KTM has had to work on, is making their map switch, which they have. They have a map switch that has map 1 and map 2, and then you have traction control options on both of those. And they've actually differentiated those quite a bit. Number 1 is considered their standard map, and number 2 is considered an aggressive map. And so, Trevor, you're coming off of a 252-stroke racing last year, and now you're riding a 254-stroke, so it definitely had a lot of beans.
Yes, there's way more power than I'm used to, and more power than I'd probably like. But still, I could kind of find a way to ride it comfortably.
You know the throttle goes both ways, right?
Yes. Trying to figure that out. But for me, when I ride a 450, just having all that power, even in general, I like to kind of lug a bike and ride a gear higher. So getting on the 450, it made it easier, and I could ride it fast, riding a gear higher. And with the mapping, there's map 1 and 2. I actually preferred map 2, which is the aggressive map, because it made it easier to ride a gear higher. And I also turned the traction control on for most of the day to kind of help mellow it out even more.
And so that's where I like your riding style. I like that gear high riding style. I actually have the same, and here's where I'm a little bit heavier. What are you weighing in at?
I'm right on 155, 160.
Yeah, so I'm 200 pounds, and so I'm putting a little more of a load on it. And we had Scott in here on our Husky Rockstar Edition test, which you can also listen to, and he's a bit more. And Scott starts liking the Husky, which is very similar to KTM in map 1. I still like map 2 because I need that pickup and that snap, but if I'm actually going to complain a little bit about the motor, and the KTM even a little bit more than the Husky. And although they're supposed to be exactly the same, it just didn't feel like the KTM had as much pickup like right off of idle, and that's where when I ride a 450, I want it to kind of go chug 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 chug. That's why I'm riding a 450. If I want to rev a bike, I would get a 350, and I've said this about these motors. I feel like they're a little bit more like, like they have the 350 style more than a 450 style. So good or bad, for me, it's like it just doesn't have that bottom pickup, and map 2 was necessary for me, and a lot of times I didn't want traction control because I would get into the throttle a lot, and I kind of wanted to feel it spin up, and then I'd back off into power, where when it wasn't until the end of the day, kind of going up the hills, that I wanted the traction control, because it really does work. And then it's like a double-edged sword, because then when I would go in and the bike would slide out, I couldn't use the throttle to kind of control it, because it was already sliding, and the bike was doing something different than what my wrist thought it was doing. So I'm a little bit torn. And it's funny because the bikes, I think they come with 2 different airbox covers. One's a vented one, which actually allows a little bit more aggressive, more aggressive feeling power. Maybe a little bit it's the sound too. But we had the vented cover on there, and I like I said, I just wish there was a little bit more right off the bottom.
Yeah, definitely a place like Glen Helen, the map 2 helped a lot getting up the hills and everything, and that's where I've kind of found like map 2 is nice because it could have the power to get up the hills, but I felt like it was just spinning, and I didn't like that. So the traction control kind of really helped out the motor and everything, just kind of get up the hill and keep that power down. And for a 450, like, it's really nice when you have that power and to be able to keep it. And it was still enough to where you could hold on to the bike and everything. And when I was riding without the traction control, I found myself getting like arm pump because it was so fast, and I was like just trying to hold on to the bike to a certain degree with it.
So it wheelies noticeably more without traction control. And I mean, especially on the uphills, you like the front end starts coming up when you don't want it to. And it's not that the traction control like mutes the power. It doesn't. Yeah, no. It doesn't mute the power. It just kind of makes you go forward more than like lifting the front wheel and it's not slow. And that's what kind of thing people can get scared about. Hey, the traction control. But yeah, I'm maybe I'm a little more old school, and I'm so used to feeling the spin that when I start feeling it spin, I might back off, where I should just goose the throttle and let the traction control do the work. And one other thing, so I think the Brembo clutch on the KTM has really good control. It's not as finicky as the Magura on the KTM, or on the Husky, which I do like. I like the quick engagement because there's better snap, but it's kind of a personal thing. But that Brembo has really good control, and I felt like the ability to control the power with the clutch is pretty insane on that bike, and I know for a fact that those clutches are pretty durable. But one other small complaint I had is I was looking for a little bit more engine braking, and I didn't do it today, and I should have. I should have played with the idle, backing the idle off a little bit to see if I could, get some more of that to come into play. But again, it's a very light, it's a quick revving light motor, and sometimes that you're trying to get that character a lot of times for the handling, and it has an effect on the power, and not the amount of power, it's the delivery of power, and it's and I think, especially since you guys are coming off of 2-strokes and smaller bikes, that you're never riding it where I'm riding it. You're so used to revving stuff, you're not letting it torque down. So for a lot of people, it's not necessarily a problem.
Yep, I agree.
So onto the suspension. Again, we have 3 different weights, or well, at least 2 different weights. I am scaling in closer to the 200-pound range. Tyler?
I'm more towards the 160 range.
And I'm same 160 range.
So we we were able to easily get the proper sag, and I think these guys are on the light end and I'm on the heavy end, but it was basically 2 turns of shock spring preload to get the bike to the 105 recommended sag. I rode the bike all day long with the right sag, and it never bothered me. Initially, the first time I rode it, I said I want to play around with the fork, but I actually hopped off and switched over to the Husky because we were going back and forth today. But right off the bat, I'm pretty impressed with how much this bike has changed in the 2 years it's been around. The suspension, I think, is a large part of that. it feels like they've just made everything, we'll call it slipperier. And of course they're bragging about their seal in the back and the shock linkage, and they're giving that a lot of credit. The front fork is completely redesigned. They have a new, what they call trampoline style mid valve in there that allows a little bit more flow. It actually, in combination with the altered air cartridge, it allows the bike to hold itself up higher in the front without getting harsh. So leave that to the suspension experts, but the test riders all here, I think, were pretty much in agreement that that's an improvement, and you rode the 19 for sure.
Yeah, I rode our 2019 450 comparison. I wasn't a huge fan of the KTM with the air forks and all that stuff, but riding the bike today here at Glen Helen, there was speed up. Everyone and their mother was out here, so the track was beat, but it handled really well. Definitely didn't get that typical air fork harshness, especially I spent a lot of time on the KTM air fork the last.
So you said typical air fork harshness. Now you're being an air fork hater. That
people tend to complain about, I guess.
And everybody knows that I'm an air fork lover.
Yes.
So there's a reason for what you're feeling. But air forks tend to be very progressive, and it's funny, the changes that WP has made is to make it act a little bit more like a spring fork, especially in the middle of the stroke, without going to the weight of the spring fork, number one, but allowing it to have that initial suppleness and also the ramp up and progression that an air fork kind of provides. So, and then you're coming off a Yamaha, which has forks that are hand built by God and delivered to you personally, because they are the best forks ever, correct?
Yeah.
Well, what'd you think of the fork? It was junk,
honestly,
right?
No, I like the forks a lot, and I haven't really ridden much air forks, and Trevor has, and he's told me his opinions, and they're more negative about them. And honestly, I really enjoyed the forks today. Like, all we had to do is just bone stock. They're doing pretty good, and then we just took 2 clicks and slowed down the rebound, and the bike just worked amazing after that, and I really enjoyed that. And I didn't know if I'd like the air forks or not, but after doing that, I really enjoyed the way the air forks felt throughout the whole day, and throughout the beat up Glen Helen and the smooth Glen Helen, they always were working good.
And when I went back on the bike, they had played with the setting. They slowed the rebound down and lightened up the compression.
Yes.
And I was blown away by so it's 2 clicks on each end, 2 slower on the rebound, 2 less on compression. And I tried compression alone, and it didn't work. It made it better some places and worse others. And I tried 2 stiffer, better some places. I'm like, oh, that's good. And I've always been a little hesitant to dive into the rebound. Maybe it's because I have to pull a screwdriver out and use. But now they have this nice little finger clicker on the bottom that's simple to get to. But these guys came up with a really good setting, and all of a sudden, and initially our thing was, man, I like everything about the bike, but the turn-in, the turn to the turns was a little bit, and that kind of made it go away. Yep. And didn't affect it in a bad way anyplace else on the track. Yep. So the clickers, really work, especially on the fork. And I know Scott played around a lot with the quick clickers on the Husky, which is very similar, and he had good results both front and rear, coming from a heavier weight where he had to rely a little bit more on what the clicks could do. So we overall are pretty good shape on suspension. I don't think that you would be unhappy if you just give the thing a little bit of time and make sure, ride height seemed to be pretty critical.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely in the ballpark, and it's something that, coming off the 19, like I said, it's more of a struggle to find a good setting, whereas today, just a couple small clicker changes instantly made me happy. On
a track that wasn't a lot of fun for.
No.
I mean, I know there were other bikes I would just load up and go home when it was this rough, and that bike I actually rode till the track shut down because I was excited about it. It was working well.
The KTM really felt lightweight, and I really enjoyed that for 450. I was very surprised for how lightweight it was and everything. I was expecting it to be a lot heavier and stuff, and just taking it right off the stand right away, I could just feel how much lighter it was, and it definitely helped it get through a lot of different things, and I think it helped it corner a lot. And compared to it was almost as light as my YZ250 that I have, and I would say maybe even a little lighter it felt. And I just really enjoyed the feel of that, and it helped it. I think it was really good for a 450.
Yeah, and the that is kind of the theme, or it seems like the direction KTM is trying to go is to make the 450 feel they have a 350. They have an insanely light, very powerful bike, but it's not a 450. And I guarantee you when they go out and do testing, they pull that 350 out and then ride it back to back with the 450 and go, what kind of changes can we make? And you've seen it with the engine architecture getting smaller. They've tuned up the chassis. A lot of the stuff they're doing. I mean, that air fork is a few pounds lighter than anything with a spring in it. So they're gaining advantages there. And, overall, that kind of light nature makes it feel, and I say this in a good and a bad way, more like a 400 or a 350 than a 450 or a 500. Hearing you say that it feels as light as your two-stroke is kind of shocking, but then again, your two-stroke is based off a pretty, kind of funny. That's an old that YZ250 has been around for a long, long time, and then you kind of compare it to it, and then you have a lot of experience on KTM two-strokes, which are ridiculously light, and now you're riding a KTM 250F, and I'd like to hear what you think.
Honestly, I've ridden KTM 250 two-strokes, 250F, even spent a little bit of time on 350 four-strokes, and I mean the 450 today could have been a 350 four-stroke easily, just with how light it felt. It's definitely, I know the weight on the scale is very close.
It is the lightest. It is the lightest 450 for sure.
But typically, at least in the past, it hasn't translated as much to on the track, whereas the 350 still feels very light compared to a 450. But I felt today that the 450 kind of closed the gap to a 350 in weight feel and handling feel.
And here's where you combine the whole handling equation. Is that power always, the more power you have, the heavier bikes tend to feel. And so I think some of the style of the power delivery, which like we say is very smooth and linear, but being, light, and I remember 2 years ago when we did our 450 comparison, like you could actually ride the KTM at a high RPM and it still was nimble.
Yeah.
Where the other 450s, you ride them at a high RPM and they want to go straight.
Yeah.
They're not agile and nimble and stuff, and so they've definitely lightened up some of the rotational masses in there. That's kind of what we're feeling, we're talking about. If you want a chunky 450, then maybe this isn't the bike. But if you're coming up off of a 250F, you're going to feel so much more at home on an engine, on a handling platform like this than something more like the Yamaha and the Honda and the Kawasaki that have, we'll call it a bigger bike feel. I think KTM's built a hell of a mini bike and disguised it as a 450 motocross bike.
Yeah, and I think the 450 today too also turned really well. Whether you're in a rut or in a berm, it kind of, once you got into the berm, it kind of stayed planted and carried you all the way through. And then if you want to cut down to pass someone or just kind of try to avoid the chop or avoid a certain rut, you could easily change directions, pivot, and cut across.
It has that unique character where you can turn on the front wheel if you want, and if you want to slide around a turn, it'll do that as well. It's like it does everything equally well. I prefer a bike that turns on the front wheel, so I scoot forward on the tank and I put this bike anywhere I want, and then I don't like sliding too much, but I felt comfortable sliding on this bike, and that's a big thing for me. I mean, I just like a lot of bikes that are known like back end turning bikes I fight with, and this one I'm not fighting with one bit.
Yeah, I was really good at turning, like Jimmy said, on both like the front and rear end. Like Glen Helen has like a Talladega where you just get the back end out on it, and it just felt like it could just stay there, and it didn't want to like kick or do anything weird. Like it just did it smoothly, and then you'd come into those tighter ruts, and it would want to just turn super tight easily, no problem. And Trevor and I were saying when we first hop on it, like it just cornered so well. Like it was amazing on how well it could corner.
So you also, on the Husky, you felt like the tank and the radiators are a little bit wide. How did this work for your knees, longer legs?
The KTM definitely felt a lot like thinner on the shrouds, and I really liked that because it didn't make my leg feel like it was like I'd put it out, and it wouldn't feel like it's going out super far or anything. Like it just felt like it was going straight, and I really liked that. It made me feel like I had more control of the bike because it had that tighter grip on the bike.
It's interesting. I think that, because the radiators on the frame and stuff is the same width. So it's interesting how, whether it's a visual thing, and I like how the Huskies are rounded a little bit. But, and this is a strange thing, and this kind of comes into handling too. I ride a lot of KTMs. I ride a lot of bikes that are orange, and I'm not kidding you. I hop on the KTM, and just because it's orange, I feel like I feel a little bit like, I don't know, just that little bit more comfortable. And yeah, I ride blue ones. I have Hutzenbergs, and Yamahas, and I ride some white ones. So one of my Hutzenbergs is white. So I ride different color bikes. But it's funny how, I like you said, you feel more comfortable, and you're actually saying, hey, it's the radiator shrouds, and whether it's wider or not, it's interesting. I just hopped on it and I felt like, hey, this I just felt a little bit more comfortable on it. Although I didn't, compared to the Husky, I didn't like the engine as much, which is just kind of strange. But they're so close.
Yep. Kind of the KTM are super narrow. I'm used to running a bigger tank and all that good stuff. So riding with a small tank and everything, everything feels super, super narrow. And the KTM's narrow in general anyways.
Yeah.
So something I enjoyed for sure.
Yeah. The brakes are insane.
Yes.
Like a lot of power and a lot of control.
Yeah.
Front and rear. I know some people struggle with finding the rear brake pedal, but once you get used to it, it's not much of an issue. The fit and finish on the bike is just all the little knickknacks and stuff that come with the factory edition make it pretty nice. The acro muffler is just literally like a work of art, and the sound level is pretty down.
Yes. But
when you ride it like does not feel like a quiet muffler.
No, it's definitely
it goes.
Yes, it's a fast bike for sure. Muffler doesn't hold it back, though I do enjoy not having a loud bike.
It's not raspy. It sounds good. Yeah, so I think KTM's kind of hit a home run. Now we got to talk about what we don't like, and so I complain a little bit about like the low end power delivery. I'm especially here today. I wasn't a huge fan of the tires. I found I would like to put like a little softer sidewall tire on there. And maybe something that's a little more intermediate terrain. But that's kind of that's a really picky thing, and in fact, that's the first thing I would do to that bike.
Yeah.
I like the grippy seat because I'm getting old, and it's hard to, when I twist the throttle, it's hard to keep my ass stuck in the seat. So that thing worked out for me. But overall, it's like I could line it up at a race tomorrow, just like for me, just like the Husky, and maybe we'll talk. We'll do a separate one. We'll kind of talk about the bikes back and forth. To see which one is there a better one, but I don't know. What didn't you like, Trevor?
We're splitting hairs, but I'd say I'm not a huge fan of the KTM foot pegs. For whatever reason, I've come to like stock Yamaha pegs. To me, are the best. I actually run IMS pegs on my bike, my KTM. I'm not a huge fan of the KTM ones. They're a little smaller and narrower. Just for whatever reason, I just haven't felt super comfortable on them, but I can still ride them, no problem.
Yeah, I was having kind of the same problem as Trevor. Like, I just noticed right away my feet were not wanting to stay on the pegs, and I really didn't like that because going into corners and stuff, you need your feet on the pegs in the right position, and them just being able to move around too much, it just kind of like threw me off a little bit. But like you could get used to it, but that'd be the only thing I'd change about that bike right away is the pegs. I enjoyed everything else about it.
Yeah, I think the pegs are great. You guys are in outer space. But that shows you, like we're sitting here kind of splitting hairs about little things on a bike. But we're in the world of $10,000 dirt bikes. This is a premium product. It comes with some cool parts. I think that the triple clamp is a little bit more than just bling.
Yep.
I know that the way the front wheel is laced actually adds a little bit of a change to the way it feels and stuff. I think that's good. The muffler, they make small changes and stuff. Kudos to KTM for really separating out the button. You push the button 1 and 2. You have two different maps. The traction controllers. Yeah, really the whole shot device is a nice touch.
Yeah.
I went and did a start on the Husky with it all locked down and everything like that, and like it's that's why everybody runs them. It's like cheating, if you're going to come off the gate. So overall, pretty good bike with minimal complaints on our side. And so if you like this podcast, share it with your buddies. You can check out our other podcasts, Dirt Bike Test podcasts, and don't be afraid to listen to Tech Talk Taco Tuesday, where Jimmy answers 9 out of 10 questions without referring to a reference manual while drinking tequila, evidently. And with that, never forget to check out www.dirtbiketest.com, because if you search it, you can probably find the answer to the question you were looking for. So with that, we will see you on the next one, and cheers.